Hey there, welcome to Sleepy History Secrets, the quiet corner where history drifts past like a slow tide, and the world's worst ideas sound strangely relaxing when told in a calm voice. Tonight, we're setting sail into the early 1700s, a time when ordinary sailors decided that obeying orders was overrated, and stealing from everyone else seemed like the sensible alternative. We'll wander through the real life of Golden Age pirates, the wet hammocks, the stubborn ropes, the democracy that somehow worked, and the myths that refused to die. But before you settle in and let the sea begin to rock you, take a quiet moment to like this video or subscribe. Only if you truly enjoy falling asleep to the sound of human chaos told politely. And when you're ready, tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. There's something oddly comforting about knowing that somewhere, across time zones and oceans, someone else is awake with you, also wondering why the rum is always gone. Now dim the lights, let the world slow down. Imagine the soft creak of timber, the scent of salt and tar, and the endless grey horizon of the Atlantic. Our story begins not with a legend, but with you, a very tired, very cold sailor who hasn't been paid in half a year. It's 2 hours before dawn, and the sky above the Atlantic is the colour of iron. You're already awake, not because you want to be, but because the boatswain, the senior sailor who shouts for a living, has decided everyone should share in his insomnia. Your hands sting from salt, rough rope, and the kind of cold that seems to sit inside your bones. The ropes you pull are stiff with dried sea spray, and every movement leaves another scrape. The ship beneath your feet is a floating workhouse. Its planks groan like an old man trying to remember why he stood up. You've been aboard for 6 months since leaving port in Bristol, and the promise of pay feels like a fairy tale told by someone who has never met an accountant. On a merchant ship, wages are paid only at the end of the voyage, assuming the ship still exists by then, and you're still among the living. If either of those small conditions fails, your family gets nothing. You eat standing up because there is nowhere else to go. Breakfast is a biscuit so hard you could file wood with it. It's called hardtack, though brick would be more honest. You have to soak it in a beer to chew, and the beer itself tastes like someone forgot to finish brewing it 2 weeks ago. Every so often, a small black beetle climbs out of your food and looks at you, as if to remind you that technically it's his house too. Your water, stored in the wooden barrels, has long ago turned the colour of a small pond. It smells like something that used to be alive. Salted beef is the luxury item of the day, grey, chewy, and still too salty after an hour of soaking. Sometimes it has been salted, so enthusiastically that even the rats refuse it. Around you, the ship's captain walks with the confidence of a man who can't be fired. His word is law, and his main form of communication is punishment. The whip he carries is called a cat with 9 tails, 9 knotted lashes that bite harder than most animals. The sound it makes when it lands is sharp and final. Sailors don't shout when they're whipped. They go silent halfway through, because there's no air left to scream with. You have seen men punished for climbing too slowly, for answering back, or for simply existing in the wrong mood. And if that sounds harsh, remember that some sailors didn't even choose this life. Naval press gangs roamed port towns, grabbing men off the street to serve by force. You were lucky, if that's the right word. You signed on willingly, though by now it's not clear why. Your job never stops. You haul lines, scrape decks, patch sails, and pump out the bilge. The foul mix of seawater and everything else that seeps into the bottom of the ship. It smells like wet wood, spoiled ale, and despair. You climb the rigging until your arms shake, high above the deck, where one wrong move means falling into a cold grave. There's a quiet rule among sailors: never look down. Not because of the height, but because of how far there is to go before someone cares you're gone. You earn almost nothing, and even that is uncertain. When the ship returns home, the captain might simply invent fines to keep your wages. A missing tool here, a complaint there. You've seen it happen. Men who worked a year straight, ending up with only enough coins to get drunk once before signing up again. It's less a career, more a slow-motion sentence. And so, in the darkness before dawn, while the sea hums beneath you and the wind claws at your clothes, you start to think. You think about the rumour you heard in some tavern, about ships that fly no flag, where the crew shares everything and no man is whipped for being slow. Ships where decisions are made by vote, where food and pay are fair, and the only law is the one everyone agreed to. At first you laughed when you heard it. It sounded impossible. But impossible is starting to look appealing. Because what could be worse than this? You already live with hunger, fear, and the occasional flying splinter. The only thing missing is freedom. The sea ahead is black, but it glows faintly under the moon. You pull at the ropes again, feel the muscles in your back protest and glance toward the horizon. That's when you see it, a shape cutting across the waves, smaller and faster than any merchant ship. It's moving with purpose, sails full and clean. You squint, but there are no flags, no markings, just the clean silhouette of confidence. Someone beside you whispers, "Pirates." The word feels both frightening and tempting, like the name of a sin you might finally allow yourself. The captain shouts orders. The crew rushes to load the few cannons you have, short, stunted things that look embarrassed to be here. The fast ship keeps coming. Then, with a puff of smoke and a boom that rolls through the air like a slow heartbeat, a cannonball skips across the water just ahead of your bow. A warning. A single polite sentence in the language of violence. Stop, or the next one won't miss. Your captain hesitates. He knows the rules of this game. His cargo is insured, his sailors are not. He lowers your ship's flag, the universal gesture of surrender. The deck grows still, except for the sound of ropes tightening as the stranger draws near. You watch as grappling lines fly across, metal hooks clanging against wood. The ships lock together, wood against wood, like the start of a conversation. They come over the side quickly, not as a mob but as a practiced team. They're men like you, sun-browned, scarred, dressed in loose shirts and confidence. They move like people who no longer have anyone above them. There's no shouting, no random cruelty, just efficiency. Your heart pounds, but beneath the fear there's something else. Curiosity, maybe even envy. These are not the monsters of tavern tales. They are sailors who stopped asking permission. And then one of them, calm and steady, steps forward. He's not the captain. You can tell by his manner. He introduces himself as the quartermaster, a word you've only heard in rumours. His voice is firm but almost friendly. He explains they have no wish to harm ordinary sailors. They're here for cargo, and for anyone willing to join them. He offers you a choice, simple and direct. You can stay and keep living the life you know, or you can cross over and live by your own hand. Equal shares, clear rules, no whips. You'll still work hard, he says, but you'll work for yourself. You glance at your ship's captain, the man who's held your wages hostage for half a year. Then you look back at the pirates. They look tired too, but in a different way. The kind of tired that comes from doing what you chose. You feel something rising in your chest that might be hope or foolishness. They're similar feelings at sea. A few men step forward. Then, so do you. You climb the rope, cross the rail, and set foot on a new deck. A tin mug is thrust into your hand. Rum, watered and rough. But it tastes like freedom. The ship sways under your feet. Somewhere the quartermaster nods. The horizon looks exactly the same, yet, somehow, the world has changed entirely. The world smells different on this ship. There's tar, salt and gunpowder like before, but underneath it, something unexpected. The faint sweetness of tobacco and cooked meat. You realise quickly that you have stepped from one kind of prison into something far less predictable, but strangely alive. The men around you move with quiet confidence. They nod, grin, and return to their tasks without waiting for shouted orders. No, one cracks a whip. No one curses at random. The rhythm here is faster, but it feels lighter, like music played without a conductor, messy in its own way, but free. The man who brought you across, the quartermaster, watches as you take in your surroundings. His coat is plain, his beard neatly trimmed. He has the air of someone who is obeyed not because of rank, but because of reputation. He tells you that his job is to speak for the crew, to keep the captain honest, and to make sure every man gets his share. In his calm tone, you hear something you've never heard at sea before. Fairness spoken without apology. You still hold the tin mug of grog they handed you. The drink burns slightly, but it steadies your nerves. You glance back toward your old ship, now shrinking against the horizon, still floating, but lifeless without you. The quartermaster notices where you're looking and says softly, "You'll not miss it for long." You believe him almost immediately. The pirates gather around the main deck as the ship's captain appears. He's younger than you expected, perhaps in his 30s, with eyes sharp enough to read a storm. He greets you without arrogance, explaining that on this ship, command is not ownership. "I give orders in battle," he says, "and advice the rest of the time. If I stop deserving either, they vote me out." He says it plainly, as if it's no more remarkable than saying the sky is blue. This idea, that a man can lose power simply by losing trust, feels like blasphemy to everything you've known. But it's a blasphemy that makes sense. You think of your old captain, who would rather sink the ship than admit a mistake. This one, you suspect, might actually listen. The quartermaster unrolls a piece of parchment, creased and stained from use. It's their contract, the ship's articles. He reads aloud, not in ceremony but in simple language so even the least literate man can understand. You hear rules about conduct, work, and shares of profit. Every man, from captain to cook, is promised a voice and a share. Every man agrees to obey during battle and speak freely in peace. You're told the captain gets 2 full shares, the quartermaster 1.5, and everyone else 1. Skilled men, like the carpenter or the surgeon, might receive a little extra, not for privilege, but because expertise saves lives. You smile faintly. On your old ship, such details were decided behind closed doors by men who'd never lifted a rope. There's also a rule about fighting. If 2 men have a grudge, they settle it on land one at a time with pistols or swords, never aboard the ship. The quartermaster explains that anger is allowed, but accidents are expensive. On a crowded deck of wood and powder, a single bad temper can sink everyone. He reads another rule: no open flames after 8 bells, roughly 8 o'clock in the evening. Not for discipline, but for survival. 1 candle too close to a rope, and the whole ship becomes a floating bonfire. You think of your old ship's officers drinking by lamplight, spilling oil, laughing at the danger. Here, there's no laughter about that. They learned their caution the hard way. Then comes something that catches you off guard. A rule about injury compensation. A man who loses an arm in battle receives 600 pieces of 8, a silver coin worth almost a month's pay on a merchant ship. A leg is worth 500, an eye 100. The amounts sound abstract, but when the quartermaster explains it, the meaning is clear. This is their version of insurance. If you bleed for the crew pays you back. It's the first time in your life anyone has promised such a thing. When he finishes reading, the parchment is set atop a barrel. He passes round a quill and an ink bottle, the ship's version of a pen and contract. Not everyone writes their name. Some just draw an X, their own mark of allegiance. You hesitate for a moment, then dip the quill into ink that smells faintly of iron. The mark you leave is crooked but certain. A quiet cheer rises from the men. Not loud, just the kind of sound people make when welcoming someone who will soon be part of the noise and sweat beside them. The quartermaster nods once. "Welcome to the company," he says. The word company makes you smile. You've traded one for another, but this time you own a share of it. The captain orders the sails trimmed and the deck stirs into motion. You're shown how to coil a line their way. Faster, cleaner, more deliberate. You notice how everyone moves with practiced confidence. Even when the sea tilts underfoot, no one shouts. They trust each other's timing. A ship like this works not because of fear, but because everyone knows mistakes are expensive for all. The vessel itself is smaller than your old one, but far more alive. The ropes are taut, the sails clean, and the crew more numerous than you expected. They handle their weapons as naturally as their tools. You see small pistols tucked into belts, cutlasses hanging at hips, and a few muskets stacked by the mast. But there's no show of force, just readiness. The air hums with quiet purpose, not threat. You're assigned a spot below deck, between two cannons and a bundle of spare rope. A hammock hangs from the beams, swaying gently. You lie back in it, feeling the rough canvas cradle your weight. The space is crowded, the air thick with the smell of tar and human life, but it feels less lonely than your bunk ever did. There's a rhythm down here, snores, murmurs, the soft percussion of the sea against the hull. It's messy, but it's yours. Above, you can still hear voices, low laughter, footsteps, the occasional creak of wood. Someone hums a tune, off-key but steady. You recognise it from somewhere, a sailor's shanty, a song meant to keep time while working the capstan, that great wooden wheel used to lift, the anchor. It sounds different here though. It's slower, almost tender. The words drift down like the wind itself. A short life, but a merry one. You close your eyes for a moment and think about what that really means. It isn't just a boast, it's a philosophy. The men on this ship have accepted the trade, risk for freedom, danger for equality. They know the sea will kill some of them, but at least it won't do so under orders shouted from a quarterdeck throne. Somewhere above, someone opens a bottle of rum. You hear the cork pop, the liquid pour, the easy laughter that follows. Not the laughter of cruelty, but of belonging. It's contagious. For the first time in years, you laugh quietly to yourself. The sound surprises you. Tomorrow, there will be work. Endless, exhausting work. But it will be work done by choice. The wind shifts slightly, and the ship adjusts its sails with a whisper. You feel the deck tilt beneath you, steady and sure, and realise that for the first time you're moving towards something instead of away from it. You drift towards sleep to the rhythm of the sea and the distant hum of voices above. The line between duty and freedom blurs until it's almost pleasant. The ship carries you onward, creaking softly, and you dream of a world where rules are chosen, not imposed, and every man, even you, gets to raise his voice. Morning comes with the scent of salt and frying fat. Someone has managed to cook something resembling breakfast, though on a ship, cooked is usually just a word for warmed near a fire and hoped for the best. You sit cross-legged on the deck, a plate of salted pork in your hands, watching the slow sunrise ripple across the sea. The water glows copper and gold. The world feels vast and new again. The quartermaster joins you, chewing on a piece of hard bread and glancing toward the sails. He doesn't shout, doesn't strut, he simply watches. Around him, men work quietly, repairing ropes, checking powder stores, cleaning weapons. Every movement feels deliberate. You realise this ship isn't run by fear, it's run by pride. They're not working for a captain's mood anymore, they're working for themselves. After breakfast, the captain calls everyone together. There's no ceremony, no drum roll, no parade, just a group of men forming a half circle around the main mast. The captain stands beside the quartermaster, and the quartermaster carries the ship's articles once more. You've already signed them, but now you'll hear them explained in full with all their strange poetry and logic. The quartermaster unrolls the parchment, edges darkened by candle smoke, and reads slowly. Each article is short, written in plain words, as much for memory as for law. There are no long speeches about duty or honour, only simple truths about how to survive without turning on each other. Every man shall have an equal vote in affairs of the moment. He pauses and the crew nods. That means when the ship decides where to sail or whether to attack another vessel, everyone has a say. If your hand is steady enough to hold a rope, it's steady enough to hold a voice. The next line is about discipline. If any man defrauds the company of even a single coin, he shall be marooned. It sounds harsh, but you can feel the weight of it. This is their greatest sin. Not disobedience, but betrayal. You can be drunk, you can be loud, you can even be wrong. But you cannot steal from your brothers. Another rule declares that no fighting shall be permitted aboard. Grudges are to be settled ashore, pistol and powder, or sword and sand. It's not about honour, it's about practicality. On a ship built of dry wood and surrounded by barrels of gunpowder, one bad temper could kill everyone. The quartermaster moves down the list, explaining as he goes. Lights out at 8 bells. You already know this one. No open flame after nightfall. He gestures to the ropes overhead. The sails, the powder barrels line neatly by the gun deck. Fire doesn't choose favourites, he says. The men laugh quietly, the kind of laugh that means they've seen it before. Then comes a rule you find oddly touching. Musicians shall rest on the Sabbath, but the rest of the week they shall play. You look around until you find the fiddler, a wiry man with a cheerful grin who bows as the crew laughs. His job is as important as the carpenter's. He keeps rhythm, not for the sails, but for the hearts. The captain takes over for the next part. His voice carries easily across the deck, not because it's loud, but because people want to hear it. He explains how leadership works here. The captain commands in battle where hesitation kills, but in peace, his authority dissolves into the crowd. I am the war chief, he says, and he nods to the quartermaster, is the peace chief. Together they form the ship's balance, one holding power only when the other lets go. It's a strange idea, a floating government run on votes and trust. The carpenter, standing nearby, mutters that the ship is like a small country made of wood. Someone else calls it the Republic of the Sea. The name sticks. Next comes the part everyone waits for, the shares. The captain gets 2 full shares of any prize, the quartermaster 1.5, skilled men like the surgeon or cook 1.25, and everyone else 1. There's no fine print, no tricks. The system is brutally simple and brutally fair. You think about your old ship, where wages were hidden behind excuses and deductions. Here, everything happens in daylight. There's a murmur of approval when the quartermaster reminds everyone about the injury fund. A man who loses a limb or an eye receives a set amount from the treasury before any division of loot. He reads the figures again. 600 silver coins for a right arm, 5. 100 for a leg, 100 for an eye. He doesn't call them pieces of 8 this time. He just says, enough to make you whole again, in coin if not in flesh. The men nod quietly. It's not generosity, it's practicality. They all know it could be them next time. The articles also forbid gambling with real shares. If you lose your money to dice, the quartermaster says, you'll work twice as hard to replace it. The rule is met with laughter, but it carries weight. Fairness doesn't stop at payday. When he finishes, the parchment is rolled again and tucked away in an oilcloth tube. The captain dismisses the crew, and the men scatter back to their duties. Some go to the rigging, others to the cannons, others to scrape barnacles from the hull. Work begins again, seamless, almost cheerful. You stand for a moment at the rail, staring out at the water. The ship creaks and leans, a living thing beneath your feet. You realise that, for the first time in your life, you know exactly what's expected of you. The rules are clear, written in the same language you speak, not buried in a book or shouted through a spyglass, and somehow that makes them easier to follow. The quartermaster joins you again. He's cleaning a pistol, his movements slow and steady. Strange, isn't it, he says. Men who broke the law now live by one stricter than any navy. You nod, smiling. But it's theirs, you say. He gives a short, satisfied grunt. Aye, that's the point. As the day wears on, the wind picks up. The crew moves as one, adjusting sails, hauling ropes, singing under their breath. You begin to see the rhythm of this strange democracy. Constant motion, constant cooperation. There's no waiting for orders because everyone knows what must be done. The ship isn't a dictatorship, it's a choir. At sunset, the fiddler plays on deck while men eat their salted pork and laugh quietly. You sit nearby, chewing on your ration and feeling the ship sway gently beneath you. Someone passes you a mug of grog, a simple mixture of rum and water, but somehow it tastes better here. You take a long sip, feeling warmth spread through your chest as the music threads through the evening air. Above you, the sails glow gold in the dying light, their edges fluttering like candle flames. You think about how fragile it all is. This ship, this crew, this accidental republic on a sea with no borders. But for now, it works. Against all odds, it works. The fiddler's tune slows. The quartermaster snuffs the last lantern before the night watch begins. You lean back against the rail and close your eyes, listening to the faint hum of the wind through the rigging. The world feels balanced, like a scale held still for once. Tomorrow, the ship will move again. The votes will be cast, the sails adjusted, and you'll follow where the wind and the will of the crew decides. For the first time in your life, your fate isn't commanded, it's shared. And for a sailor, that's the closest thing to peace. Morning arrives with the sound of ropes slapping the mast and gulls calling from somewhere unseen. The air smells different out here, clean and sharp with a trace of tar and salt and something faintly metallic, like the taste of the sea itself. You rise slowly from your hammock, your shoulders stiff but your spirit lighter than it's been in months. There's a strange comfort in the creak of the wood, the hiss of the waves against the hull, the voices calling above. The ship breathes and you breathe with it. The pirates call their vessel home, though home might be a generous word. It's more like a small, floating village built out of stubbornness and rope. Every plank has been repaired a dozen times, every nail driven by hand. You can smell the work in it, sawdust, pitch, sweat, and ambition. You realise why sailors often called ships she. Like a woman, she's temperamental, beautiful, and will kill you if you're careless. The quartermaster gives you a quick tour. We keep her light, he says, running a hand along the rail. Fast ship outruns trouble, and trouble's a slow thinker. You learn that pirates prefer small, nimble vessels, sloops and brigs that can twist through wind like birds instead of lumbering beasts. Bigger ships carry more guns, but also more hesitation. And hesitation, at sea, is the difference between a prize and a grave. You notice how clean the deck is. On merchant ships, everything was sticky with grease and rain. Here it gleams under the sun. Every rope is coiled neatly, every cannon tied down with care. You ask about the guns and the quartermaster grins. They're not for show, he says. Each one's got its job, same as a man. You look closely. Small iron cannons, dark and solid, mounted in pairs like old friends. Each has its crew of 2 or 3, men who treat the weapons less like tools and more like pets. Below deck, space is precious. Hammocks hang in long rows, each one close enough to brush your shoulder as you pass. The air is warm and heavy with the smell of salt, sweat and old wood. A few candles burn in glass lanterns, their light soft and flickering. You duck beneath the low beams, feeling the ship's heartbeat through your feet. It groans and sighs with every wave, a sound that might drive some men mad but lulls you instead. The sea's rhythm has its own kind of peace, one that demands you move with it, never against it. At the stern, near the narrow space where the steering wheel stands, the carpenter works at a small bench. He greets you without looking up. His hands are black with pitch, his face lined and calm. Every ship leaks, he says, as if continuing a conversation you didn't start. You just learn to fix faster than she sinks. He holds up a tool, a curved iron scraper used to clean and shape the seams between planks. You ask what it's called, but he only shrugs. "Everything's got a name, lad," he says, "but names won't keep her afloat." You spend the morning learning the ropes, literally. The pirates show you how to climb the rigging without losing your footing, how to coil the line so they don't tangle, how to scrub tar into the seam so the sea stays where it belongs. Every task has a rhythm. Every rhythm has a reason. You find a kind of beauty in the work. It's physical, exhausting, but clear. No shouting, no hidden rules, only muscle and purpose. At noon, the cook bangs a ladle against a pot. Lunch. He's a broad man with one ear and a grin that suggests he's survived everything life could throw. His kitchen is a small corner of chaos. A blackened stove, a few iron pots, and a barrel of salted meat. He ladles out a thick stew that smells better than it looks. Don't ask what's in it, he warns, and you don't. You eat with the others, sitting on the deck in a circle, bowls balanced on knees. It tastes of pepper, salt, and faint mystery. Possibly chicken, possibly not. The fiddler plays as you eat, bow sliding gently across the strings. The music mixes with the slap of waves and the whisper of wind. It feels almost like grace. For a few minutes the sea stops being cruel and becomes something closer to kind. After lunch you're assigned to help repair a torn sail. The fabric, pale and enormous, ripples like a cloud as it's lowered. You sit cross-legged on the deck with a curved needle and heavy thread stitching by hand. The sail smells of sun and wind, of journeys that have not yet ended. It's slow work, but satisfying. The sort of thing that lets your thoughts drift while your hands stay busy. You remember the quartermaster's words. "We keep her light." You understand now. Every extra nail, every careless patch, every lazy knot adds weight. A ship like this survives on the fine art of almost heavy, almost broken, almost perfect. When the work is done, the captain inspects everything, nodding his approval. He says little, but when he does, men listen. You can tell by the way they straighten their shoulders that respect here isn't demanded, it's earned. There's a quiet efficiency to this ship, a kind of discipline born from equality rather than fear. If someone fails, they all pay the price. That's incentive enough. The afternoon heat settles over the deck like a blanket. The sea glitters and the horizon wavers. You take a turn at the helm, hands gripping the smooth wooden wheel. It's warm from the sun, worn smooth by countless palms before yours. The wheel creaks slightly as you turn it, guiding the ship a few degrees toward the wind. Not that you think of them as degrees, just as the difference between right and wrong. The captain watches for a moment, then gives a short nod. You feel a strange pride bloom in your chest. The ship obeys, and so do you, willingly. As the sun begins to sink, the crew gathers again on deck. The fiddler tunes his instrument, the cook pours watered rum into wooden cups, and someone tosses you a biscuit so hard it could serve as ammunition. The day's work is done. The men talk quietly, trading stories, lays, and small jokes. One claims he once saw a mermaid near Jamaica. Another swears he found a floating chest filled with sugar, rum, and a single angry chicken. You learn quickly that on a pirate ship the line between history and entertainment is delightfully blurred. As the laughter fades and night draws near, lanterns are lit and then quickly snuffed. Just long enough to check ropes, never long enough to tempt fire. The stars emerge, bright and countless, scattered across the black sky. Someone beside you points to a faint streak of light, a shooting star, and says softly, "That's a soul that just quit the sea." It's said without sadness, just quiet recognition. The sea keeps what it takes, but she gives a view like this in return. You lie back against the rail, letting the hum of the ship lull you. You think about how small it is, barely the size of a city street, yet it carries more freedom than any kingdom you've ever known. Every plank, every nail, every line of rope is part of a fragile miracle, a house made of trees floating on the edge of the world. For a moment, you wonder if the land ever felt this alive. The first thing you learn about life at sea is that time doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the bells. Every 4 hours, someone strikes them. 1 for the first half hour, 2 for the next, all the way to 8, which means the watch is over and another begins. The sound echoes through the ship like a heartbeat made of bronze. It's not music, but it becomes the rhythm of your life. The bells tell you when to wake, when to eat, when to work, and when to pretend to rest. Out here, the day is never 12 hours long or 24, it's always 4. You're on the morning watch now, dawn to mid-morning, and the light has just begun to spill across the sea. The air is sharp, almost sweet, the way it gets before the sun starts baking the deck. You pull on your rough shirt and climb out from the shadows below, blinking as the horizon glows gold. The sails stretch above you, full and taut, like the lungs of a giant. They creak and sigh with every change in wind, and the ropes hum in answer. It's a language you're learning slowly, one whisper at a time. The quartermaster nods as you take your position at the rail. "Today we clean," he says simply. Cleaning doesn't sound heroic, but it's the secret heartbeat of every ship that's ever survived. Salt eats everything: rope, iron, flesh, and patience. If you don't scrub her bones clean, the sea will do it for you, and not kindly. You fetch a bucket of sand and seawater, kneel, and begin rubbing the deck until it gleams. The grains grind under your palms like tiny knives, but the rhythm is soothing. Each stroke erases yesterday's footprints. Above you, men climb the rigging to check the lines. They move with the calm recklessness of those who no longer remember fear. The ropes sway, the masts lean, and they keep climbing anyway. One calls down a joke about gravity being an unfaithful mistress. No one laughs too loudly. Everyone knows she's listening. When the decks are clean, you move to the cannons. Each gun is a small iron monster, squat and heavy, bolted to a wooden carriage. You've learned that keeping them clean is more important than firing them. You wipe away salt with oily rags, polish the barrel until it reflects a pale version of your face, and check that the powder stores below stay dry. The quartermaster reminds you that a damp gunpowder barrel is like a broken promise, loud in theory, silent in practice. Next, you help the carpenter with what he calls the daily groaning. The ship always complains. Wood swells, nails loosen, seams leak, and ropes fray. It's a constant conversation with the sea. She pushes, you patch. She pulls, you tie tighter. You learn to listen for sounds. A new creak, a deeper thud, as if the ship were talking in her sleep. Sometimes the carpenter mutters that she dreams badly when the wind shifts. At noon, the bell rings 8 times. The end of the morning watch. You hand over the deck to the next crew and collapse near the forecastle, the raised platform at the front of the ship. Someone passes you a mug of watered rum and a strip of dried beef. The rum tastes faintly like freedom, and the beef tastes faintly like regret. You chew both with equal effort. The heat grows thicker as the sun climbs higher. The sea turns from blue to blinding white. Sweat stings your eyes, and the deck feels hot enough to cook on. You rest in the narrow shade cast by the sail, the air buzzing with the sound of wind through rigging. Even resting here is work. You shift constantly, so you don't burn where the sun finds you. The man beside you, a grizzled veteran with tattoos winding down both arms, tells you how time is counted at sea. No clocks here, he says, just sand and habit. He shows you a small hourglass no bigger than his palm. Inside, pale sand trickles between 2 bulbs of glass. Every half hour, someone flips it. When the sand runs out 8 times, the bells are struck again. He calls it the heart of the ship. You realise that this tiny object decides when hundreds of men sleep, eat, and labour. It's not science so much as faith. faith that gravity won't forget its job. The afternoon watch begins with maintenance. You take turns polishing the brass fittings, patching ropes, and checking the sails for wear. The ship is a jealous creature. Neglect her for a day and she'll punish you for weeks. You scrape barnacles off the hull when the sea calms enough to lower a rope and hang beside her. The world down there feels heavy and close, the water pressing against your ears, the wood breathing just inches from your face. You scrape until your hands blister, then climb back aboard, dizzy but proud. The carpenter claps your shoulder and says, "Now you've really met her." By late afternoon, the wind shifts again. The captain appears, quiet but alert. He scans the horizon with a small brass tube, a spyglass polished to a soft glow. You notice how carefully he moves, how the crew watches him not with fear, but with curiosity. When he lowers the glass, he simply says, "Nothing today," and disappears below deck. You find yourself relieved. You're still learning the difference between ordinary days and the ones that end in thunder. As evening comes, the light softens, the deck cools and shadows grow long and comfortable. You take the helm for your first short lesson. The quartermaster explains how to feel the ship's movement through your fingertips. The wheel vibrates gently, alive under your palms. "Keep her steady," he says, "but don't fight her. She knows the wind better than you." You watch the compass beside the wheel, a brass circle with a floating needle, trembling slightly but pointing north. It looks delicate, almost fragile, and yet every direction in your life depends on it. You imagine the needle as a caged bird that somehow knows which way freedom lies. The stars appear one by one, faint sparks across the darkening sky. The bells ring again, marking the end of another watch. You realise that an entire day has passed, divided neatly into pieces by that unseen clock. Time here doesn't flow. It folds, 4 hours at a time, like the pages of a book you never stop rereading. You feel strangely at peace with it. The sameness is comforting. In this world of waves and wind, predictability is a kind of mercy. Below deck, the air is thick with the smell of wet rope and bodies, but you're too tired to mind. You fall into your hammock, swaying gently with the movement of the sea. The candlelight flickers and the shadows ripple like water across the beams above. Someone nearby hums a tune about home, a word that now feels less like a place and more like a heartbeat under your feet. The last sound you hear before sleep is the bell again, far above, telling you that another watch has begun. Another 4 hours, another turn of the sea. It's strange, but you no longer hate the sound. The bell no longer orders you, it keeps you company. You close your eyes, and the rhythm of the ocean fills the silence where the world used to shout. You wake to the smell of something burning. Not fire, thank goodness, but food, or something pretending to be food. The cook's corner, wedged between barrels and crates, is already alive with smoke and profanity. He's stirring a pot that hisses like a snake, muttering under his breath as if arguing with the stew itself. The air is thick with the smell of salt, meat, and ambition. Breakfast is bread so hard you could use it to hammer nails. You dunk it in a bowl of lukewarm liquid that claims to be coffee, but tastes mostly of mystery and regret. A few men chew silently, their jaws working like machinery. Best to soften it in rum, someone advises, handing you a flask. You try it. It doesn't help. But it does make you care less. The cook grins at your expression. "It's not bad once you stop expecting flavour," he says. His missing tooth gleams like punctuation in his smile. You thank him, partly out of politeness, and partly because you're terrified of offending the only man between you and starvation. Meals on a pirate ship are rarely memorable, unless they kill you. Salted beef, dried fish, and hard bread form the holy trinity of survival. Once in a while, you get lucky. A captured merchant's pantry, a barrel of preserved fruit, or fresh turtle meat roasted over driftwood. The turtles are a marvel, self-carrying food supplies that walk slowly and taste like the sea trying to apologise. When the catch runs low, the men fish, or trade, or raid. Hunger makes theologians of them all. The ship carries several barrels of fresh water, but fresh is a flexible term. After a few weeks, it grows green and smells faintly like laundry that lost the war against mildew. So most men drink grog, a blend of water, rum, and sometimes a squeeze of citrus when such luxury exists. It keeps you from dying of thirst or from remembering you might. At midday, the carpenter calls for help. You find him in his corner, where the light filters down through cracks in the deck like dust in a cathedral. He's sharpening a small saw, its teeth glinting. Nearby, a man lies pale and sweating, a rag tied around his thigh. "Cannon recoil," the carpenter mutters. "Fool stood too close." The air feels heavier suddenly. You realise what's about to happen. The carpenter isn't just the ship's builder. He's also the surgeon. The same man who repairs the hull now repairs the men, with roughly the same tenderness. You swallow hard. The injured sailor grips a rope between his teeth. The carpenter pours rum over the wound, then over his hands. "For cleaning," he explains, "and courage." He nods to two men to hold the patient still. Then, without ceremony, he begins. The saw's sound is steady, awful, final. You think of a branch being trimmed from a tree, not out of cruelty, but necessity. The man groans once, bites through the rope, and goes silent. When it's done, the carpenter seals the wound with a hot piece of metal, cautery, though no one uses that word here. The air fills with the smell of burned cloth, and something darker. A whisper goes through the crew. He'll live. The quartermaster appears, calm as always, and notes something in a small ledger. He's earned his share, he says softly. You realise he means the injury fund. 600 silver coins promised before Ennis. Prizes divided. The man will limp, but he'll eat. On your old ship, he'd have been tossed ashore and forgotten. Later, when the worst of the smell has faded, the carpenter joins you near the rail. He wipes his hands on a rag, eyes thoughtful. The sea's a cruel teacher, he says, but she gives good lessons if you survive them. You nod, not sure what else to say. He gestures toward the horizon. Wood breaks, men break, but both can be mended. Just takes heat, pressure, and a steady hand. You can't help but admire his calm. For him, every day is a test of endurance. One nail, one limb at a time. By evening the air cools. The crew gathers for dinner, if one can call it that. The cook serves another pot of something halfway between stew and rumour. He insists it's goat, though a few suspicious shapes in the broth suggest otherwise. Still, no one complains. The sea teaches gratitude, or at least resignation. After the meal, the fiddler plays a tune. It's not cheerful, but it's honest. The sound threads through the twilight, soft and fragile. A few men tap their feet, others hum along. Music here is more than pleasure, it's medicine. The quartermaster listens quietly, then claps once when it ends. He raises his mug. To fair shares, strong hands and quick healers, he says. The crew echoes the toast. Even the injured man, now propped on a crate with his bandaged leg, manages a grin. As darkness settles, the ship feels strangely alive. The lanterns sway gently. Their light painting gold ripples across the deck. The ocean murmurs around you, endless and indifferent. Yet on this patch of floating wood, there's warmth. Not comfort exactly, but something close enough. You think of your old life, where hunger meant weakness and injury meant dismissal. Here, pain is shared, and even misery has structure. The articles of the ship promised equality, and somehow, impossibly, they've kept that promise. You feel it in the way the crew laughs, in the way they gather around their wounded, in the quiet nods exchanged after hard work. It's a fragile world, this republic of waves and splinters, but for now, it holds. The quartermaster approaches as you're watching the stars rise. "You've done well," he says simply. You thank him, though you're not sure for what. He nods toward the sea. "She's not as heartless as she looks," he adds. "You just have to stop expecting her to be kind." You stay there long after he leaves, the ship rocking gently beneath your feet. The horizon glows faintly in the moonlight, a thin silver edge between life and oblivion. Somewhere below deck, the carpenter sharpens his tools again, ready for whatever tomorrow brings. The cook snores beside his pots, the fiddler hums to himself. And you, against all reason, feel safe. You tear a small piece from the last of your bread and drop it into the sea. The crumbs float for a moment, then vanish into the dark. "For the sea," you whisper, unsure whether it's a prayer or bargain. It doesn't matter. The ocean doesn't answer, but the wind shifts slightly, brushing your cheek like a nod. You smile, quietly, in the darkness. The day ends not with fear, but with a strange, calm gratitude for food that's barely edible, for wounds that heal badly but heal, for a life that's hard but finally yours. The next morning begins before the sun. The sea lies still, a grey sheet waiting to be written on. You step onto the deck and find the captain already there, his coat buttoned tight, a roll of paper in his hands. He's studying it with quiet intensity. You realise it's a map, though not the kind you've seen on land. It's rough and stained, the ink blurred by salt and time. The edges curl like old bark. Lines crisscross the paper, dotted with tiny notes and sketches. Small islands shaped like teeth, coastlines drawn from memory, and words like reefs here, or good water. You stand beside him, careful not to interrupt. He traces one finger along a line that runs northeast. "We're about here," he says softly, "give or take a day's wind." His tone is calm, but you notice the faint uncertainty in it. Out here, there's no such thing as precision, only approximation and faith. He hands you a small wooden device, a flat board tied to a thin rope knotted at regular intervals. "Speed," he says simply. You raise an eyebrow. "We drop it," he explains, "and count how many knots slip through your fingers before the sand in this glass runs out." He holds up a small hourglass, the kind you've seen marking time on deck. You nod slowly. It's the ocean's version of a stopwatch, only slower, older, and somehow wiser. You try it. The board splashes into the sea behind the ship, tugging gently on the rope. You let it slip through your hands, counting quietly. 1, 2, 3. The knots sting your palms as they pass. When the quartermaster calls time, you haul the rope back in. He glances at your raw fingers and smiles. "About 6 knots, he says, meaning the ship is moving fast enough to make a steady wind hum in the rigging. You rub your palms, feeling oddly proud, even though the measurement is more ritual than science. The captain then gestures to a brass ring with an arc carved into it, a simple angle finder. "To know where you are," he says, "you have to ask the sun." He holds it up toward the east, where the first orange light spills across the waves. "When the sun climbs to its highest point," he explains, "we measure the angle between it and the horizon," he demonstrates, resting the device gently against his cheek. "That tells us how far north or south we've wandered." He smiles faintly. "How far east or west, though, that's still a guessing game." You watch him work. There's something poetic about it. A man using nothing but wood, metal, and light to find his place in a world with no borders. You realise how easy it is to get lost here, not just physically but in thought. Every horizon looks the same. The sea hides its secrets well. By midday, the sun burns white and the air shimmers. The helmsman squints ahead, eyes scanning the faint line where water meets sky. You hear the quartermaster say, "Birds on the wind, east by southeast." He points to a cluster of black dots wheeling far away. Land's not near, but it's not nowhere. You learn that seabirds are as trustworthy as compasses. They never fly far from home, even when the wind tempts them. Later, the ship slows as the wind shifts. The captain calls for the sails to be trimmed. The men climb the rigging, their movements sure and steady. You follow their work with fascination. Ropes creak, canvas flaps, and suddenly the ship changes direction without complaint. It's like watching a creature adjust its body to breathe. You help haul a rope, muscles straining, palms burning. The line feels alive, thrumming with the ship's pulse. Once the course is set, the captain spreads his map again on the deck. He marks their new heading with a charcoal stub. The quartermaster stands beside him, murmuring something about currents and wind patterns. You lean closer, curious. The map looks less like geography and more like a diary. Scrawled notes of where they've been, what they've taken, where storms once rose out of nowhere. The ocean, you realise, doesn't stay still long enough for anyone to draw it properly. Each voyage redraws the world from memory. As the afternoon deepens, the light softens to honey gold. The sea reflects the colour of the sky, turning the world into an endless mirror. You find yourself alone at the rail, staring out at the quiet horizon. The surface ripples like silk, smooth and deceptive. Somewhere beneath lies an entire kingdom. Mountains, trenches, and creatures that will never see sunlight. You wonder if they ever think of you, a stranger walking above their heads on a floor made of wood. The quartermaster joins you, his hands clasped behind his back. "Beautiful, isn't she?" he says, nodding toward the water. You agree. "Aye," he continues, "and deadly too. The sea's like a woman who loves you enough to kill you kindly." He smiles, then adds, "She shows you everything, but never tells you where you are." You ask him how they find their way when clouds hide the sun. He laughs quietly. "Then we guess," he says. "We keep our heading by habit and by the colour of the water. Deep seas are darker blue, shallow turns green. Sometimes you smell land before you see it. Soil, flowers, even smoke. The nose is a better compass than that brass needle half the time." He taps the small magnetic compass hanging from his belt. "Trust her too much, and you'll end up somewhere you didn't mean to be. Like life." By evening, the stars begin to appear. Faint at first, then suddenly everywhere. The captain calls the men to the deck, holding a long thin stick with tiny sights at either end. It's called a cross-staff, though no one uses the name out loud. He lines it with the horizon and the North Star. "There she is," he murmurs. "Home for anyone who remembers." The crew grows silent. Even the sea seems to listen. You tilt your head back, watching the constellations burn against the dark. The stars shimmer, soft but eternal. The captain lowers the instrument, satisfied. "There," he says simply. "That'll do." He tucks the staff away and heads below. You stay where you are, eyes still fixed on the heavens. For a moment you understand why sailors talk to stars as if they were friends. They never lie, they never sleep, and they always keep watch. Out here, that's more than most men can promise. The wind rises slightly, carrying the smell of salt and distant rain. You take one last look at the sea, the endless, unknowable map beneath your feet, and think of how fragile it all is. A wrong calculation, a missed landmark, a cloud at the wrong time of day, and the ship would drift forever. But for now, you're exactly where you need to be, somewhere between nowhere and everywhere, guided by nothing more than trust, light, and habit. You close your eyes, letting the gentle roll of the ship carry you. The stars above flicker like thoughts in a calm mind. The compass needle, trembling quietly beside you, points north as if it actually knows what that means, and for tonight, that's enough. The sky's soft and empty when the lookout calls down from the mast. His voice cuts through the calm like a knife through cloth. "Sail!" he shouts. Every man on deck freezes for a breath, then moves at once. The captain appears within moments, climbing the quarterdeck ladder with a slow, measured calm that seems to quiet the sea itself. You follow his gaze to the horizon, a faint smudge of white, no bigger than a fingernail, rising and falling with the swell. There are few words more electric than sail. It means everything: chance, danger, maybe both. The quartermaster reaches for the spyglass and lifts it to his eye. After a long pause, he lowers it and says, "Merchantmen, by the look." His tone is calm, almost polite, as though discussing the weather. Then he adds the second sentence, the one that makes the blood quicken. "Alone." The crew moves with quiet efficiency. The ship leans slightly as the sails adjust to catch the wind. The ropes groan, the timbers creak, and you can feel the sudden change in energy. Not panic, not excitement, but focus. Every man has a place in the dance that's about to begin. You notice that the ship still flies a flag, but not the one you expect. It's a simple piece of cloth, showing the emblem of a friendly nation. The quartermaster catches your look and smirks. "No need to frighten her yet," he says. "Let them think we're just another poor soul chasing trade winds." He taps the flagpole affectionately. "We'll introduce ourselves properly later." The idea of disguise at sea feels strange, almost theatrical. You're pretending to be harmless until it's too late for anyone to run. The crew lowers their voices, adjusts ropes, and cleans the deck until it looks respectable. From a distance, you could mistake this ship for any merchant. Small, neat, well-behaved. Hours pass as the two ships drift closer. The wind has turned gentle and the sea glitters under the midday sun. The merchant ship grows larger now, fat-bellied, heavy with goods, her sails bulging like full lungs. You can almost smell her cargo: spices, tobacco, maybe sugar. The captain waits. Patience is the difference between a clean catch and a mess. The crew watches silently, each man standing ready by his post. The air feels charged, like the second before lightning. Even the sea seems to hush, aware that something important is about to happen. Finally, the captain nods. The quartermaster steps forward and gives a short order. Two men pull on the halyards, and the flag of false friendship slides down the pole. For a moment, the mast stands bare. Then the new flag unfurls in a single sharp motion. Black. The cloth snaps in the wind, edges fraying, the symbol of what you're now for all the world to see. On it, the skull grins wide and hollow, and beneath it, two bones cross like laughter, frozen in motion. Some ships prefer a skeleton holding an hourglass, a polite reminder that time is a short guest. Others paint a bleeding heart for a touch of sincerity. A few raise the red flag instead, not a warning, but a promise. Red means no mercy, no survivors, no parley. Today, it's black. An invitation, not a threat. The men cheer softly, not loud enough to break the spell. The quartermaster calls it the jolly flag, though there's nothing cheerful about it. "She saves us bullets," he says. "No one wants to fight a legend." You watch through narrowed eyes as the merchant ship begins to turn, her crew suddenly alive with panic. A flag flutters from her mast, white, pleading, the colour of surrender. But the distance is still too wide and the wind too slow. She cannot flee, and she knows it. The captain raises his hand, and your ship adjusts course, closing the gap with a predator's patience. Cannons are loaded quietly, without the theatrical banging of hammers. Powder is poured with the care of priests handling incense. The air smells of metal and salt and something that might be fear. You feel it in your chest. Not terror, but anticipation. The kind that sharpens every sense. You hear the steady rhythm of the waves slapping against the hull, the slow crack of the sails filling, the muffled creak of boots on the deck. Even the flag above whispers in time with your heartbeat. The merchant ship's crew rushes about, pulling at ropes, shouting orders that come too late. One of them fires a musket wildly into the air. A sound of desperation more than defiance. The shot falls short, the ball splashing harmlessly into the water. The captain beside you doesn't flinch. He could almost be listening to music. Then, just as the two ships draw close enough for faces to be visible, your captain lifts his hand again. The quartermaster bellows a single word: now. The drums of deception end. The ship leaps to life. The sails shift, the guns slide forward, and the black flag catches the full wind, cracking like thunder. The deck fills with motion, men running, ropes tightening, the hiss of fuses being lit. You grip the rail, heart pounding as the cannons prepare to speak. And yet, amid all the noise, the captain remains still. He watches the enemy ship with a calm that feels impossible. His fingers tap lightly against the rail, steady, rhythmic, measured. The crew takes its cue from him. He is the metronome of chaos. The first cannon fires, a deep, rolling boom that vibrates through your bones. Smoke blooms across the deck, thick and white, curling like ghostly clouds. The echo travels across the water, bouncing off the waves until it sounds like the sea itself is answering. Through the haze, you glimpse the merchant ship's deck erupting in panic. Her crew dives for cover, her sails shudder, her course falters. No more shots are fired. The threat alone has done its work. The black flag has spoken more clearly than iron ever could. Silence returns, heavy and slow. The smoke drifts away, and you can almost taste it. Bitter, sharp, metallic. The air feels light now, though your heart still beats too fast. You realise that this too is part of the job. The theatre of fear. The act of convincing strangers that resistance is more dangerous than surrender. The quartermaster grins as the merchant ship begins lowering her longboat, ready to offer her cargo instead of her blood. Marketing department of doom, he mutters, wiping sweat from his brow. Very effective, low overhead. The men laugh quietly, the kind of laughter that knows how close it came to ending differently. The captain says nothing. He turns to the helmsman and gives a short nod. The ship eases closer to the wounded merchant, the black flag still fluttering proudly above. You stand at the rail, watching the other vessel drift helplessly in the sunlight. The water between you gleams gold, calm again, as if nothing violent ever happened. You think of all the stories you've heard, pirates painted as monsters, demons of the sea, and you wonder how much of that came from scenes like this. Not chaos, not cruelty, just power made visible. The sea, it seems, loves drama. As the longboat from the merchant ship rows slowly toward you, loaded with crates and trembling men, you feel the tension begin to ease. There will be counting soon, and dividing, and perhaps a few songs before night. But for now, the world stands still. Two ships locked in silence, one victorious, one obedient, both bobbing gently on the same indifferent sea. And above them, the flag flaps lazily in the wind, its message simple and universal. Fear travels faster than bullets. The next time it happens, there's no hesitation, no polite introduction. The sea has gone steel grey under a sky the colour of pewter. The wind hums low, heavy with rain that hasn't yet fallen. You smell it before you see anything. That metallic scent of distant storms mixed with salt and smoke. Then the lookout calls again. That single word that turns calm men into instruments of movement. Sail. This one is armed. You can tell by the shape of the hull, the glint of iron at her sides. A privateer, maybe, half merchant, half predator. Someone who believes they're hunters, not prey. The captain studies her for a long moment through his glass, then closes it with a soft snap. "We'll see about that," he says quietly. The air changes. The crew, once relaxed, becomes a machine. Ropes are tightened, guns rolled into place, powder horns passed hand to hand. No one shouts. They don't need to. Everyone knows what to do. Even the sea seems to lean closer, curious to watch. The plan is simple. though the sea rarely honours simplicity. The captain gives a few short commands, and the ship begins a slow, careful turn, not toward the enemy, but across her path. The goal is to slide sideways, to cut her route with your own, so that your cannons can line up against her bow like a row of clenched teeth. You're crossing her T, though no one here uses that phrase. It's just geometry turned into survival, your broadside against her narrow face. The first shot comes from the other ship. A deep, hollow thud echoes across the water, followed by a plume of white smoke. The ball splashes short, kicking up a geyser of foam that rocks your hull. The captain's expression doesn't change. "Too eager," he murmurs. "Good." Your ship swings into place. The quartermaster shouts for silence. You can feel the deck vibrating under your feet, the pressure of tension building like thunder inside a cloud. The gunners wait behind their weapons, heavy black cannons, mouths dark and patient. They've been fed with powder and shot, tamped down, aimed low. The captain lifts his hand and holds it there for a heartbeat longer than comfort allows. Every man holds his breath. Then, with the smallest downward motion, he lets it fall. The first volley erupts. The world becomes sound. The deck shakes beneath you. Your ribs rattle, and the sky fills with white smoke. The noise isn't a bang, it's a physical force, a wall of air that pushes through you like a living thing. You taste sulphur on your tongue, bitter and hot. The smell of burnt powder and iron drifts like a storm cloud thick enough to hide the horizon. Through the smoke, you glimpse the enemy ship shudder. One of her sails splits, torn clean in half. Another cannon fires, yours this time. A chain shot, 2 iron balls linked by a short length of chain. You watch as it whirls through the air, spinning so fast it sings, and when it hits, the topmast splinters like dry bone. The broken wood groans as it falls, taking ropes, men and canvas with it. Someone shouts for reload and the rhythm begins again. Tamp, load, aim, fire. The men move in practiced unison, a choreography of violence. Another gun fires, this one packed with dozens of small pellets, grape shot they call it, meant to sweep across the deck like a giant's fist. You see flashes of movement through the smoke, the enemy's crew scrambling, ducking, shouting. The sound is chaos, but the pattern is familiar. Destruction, like music, has its own tempo. Your ears ring, your throat burns, but your hands keep moving. You pass powder bags down the line, steady a cannon as it rolls back from recoil, push it forward again. The quartermaster's voice cuts through the din, low and steady, guiding each crew like a conductor leading a furious symphony. Then you hear it. A crack, a hiss, a rush of something sharp. A splintered board explodes beside you, sending shards into the air. A piece slices your sleeve, leaving a sting along your arm. It's not deep, but it's enough to remind you that the sea has teeth on both sides. You glance toward the captain. He's still at the rail, eyes narrow, timing each shot like a man conducting the weather. Minutes stretch into eternities. The cannons fire again and again. The noise becomes almost beautiful. A rolling percussion of thunder and echo layered over the moaning wind. The ship tilts under recoil, then steadies. The smell of smoke is everywhere now, thick enough to taste. Then suddenly it stops. The quartermaster raises his hand. The gunners pause, panting, faces streaked with soot. The smoke begins to thin, and through it you see the other ship now barely moving. Her rigging hangs in tatters, her deck scattered with debris. Her flag droops halfway down the pole. You can almost hear the silence between the waves. The captain lowers his spyglass and exhales once. "Enough," he says. It's not triumph, just finality. He turns away as the enemy crew scrambles to lower their flag in surrender. You stand there, heart pounding, surrounded by the wreckage of noise. A gull circles overhead, shrieking as if to reclaim the sound the cannon stole. Around you, men begin to laugh, softly, nervously, like people waking from a fever dream. Someone jokes that swords are still the most reliable weapons ever made. Never jam, never misfire, fully rechargeable. The laughter spreads, the tension bleeds away. The quartermaster claps you on the shoulder. "First fight's always the loudest," he says. You nod, though your ears are still ringing. He looks out toward the crippled ship and adds, "We'll take her goods, patch our holes, and let her drift home with what's left of her pride. Living men spend money, dead ones don't." It's a cruel logic, but it's hard to argue with. The pirates value profit over revenge, not out of mercy, but mathematics. A living surrender saves powder, saves time, and saves funerals. As the crews prepare to board, you notice something odd. Your hands are shaking, not from fear, but from energy. The world feels sharper, louder, painfully alive. You can smell every detail: burnt powder, singed rope, wet salt, sweat. You can hear the creak of every board, the flap of every torn sail. For the first time, you understand why some men never leave this life. Battle, like the sea, is addictive. It's a storm that reminds you you're still here. By the time the smoke clears completely, the wind has shifted, carrying the scent of rain and blood away. The sun breaks through for a brief moment, gilding the water with light. The ship tilts gently, as if bowing after a performance. The men begin to reload the cannons, polish the barrels, and scrub away the soot. Order returns, just as swiftly as chaos arrived. And in that strange quiet, with the deck still trembling faintly under your feet, you realise something simple and absurd. All this, the danger, the noise, the smell of fire, is part of your new routine. Another day's work, another job well done. The captain turns, meets your eyes, and gives a small nod. His expression is unreadable, but the meaning is clear enough. You've survived your first real fight. You nod back, unsure whether to feel proud or ashamed. Somewhere deep below deck, a single cannonball rolls lazily in its cradle, thudding once like a closing heartbeat. After thunder, there is always counting. The morning after battle always feels quieter than it should. The sea itself seems to hold its breath, as if unsure whether it's allowed to move again. You wake to that strange stillness, the groan of ropes, the low hum of waves against the hull, and the faint clink of metal from somewhere above. When you climb onto the deck, you find the crew already gathering around the quartermaster. He stands beside a barrel that serves as his desk, a rolled parchment under one arm, and a short stick of charcoal in his hand. The smell of gunpowder still lingers faintly, mixed with salt and tar. Sunlight cuts through the smoke haze in soft golden beams. Someone swabs blood from the planks, while another man sharpens a knife, though not for violence, for balance. Everything here returns to order quickly, as if chaos were just another kind of chore. The quartermaster clears his throat. "Right," he says. "Let's take stock before the next storm finds us." He opens the parchment, the ship's ledger, a record of everything taken, lost, and owed. You expected greed or shouting, but the mood is calm, even reverent. This is the ship's other religion, the worship of fairness. The first items listed are not gold or silver, but rope and sailcloth. "3 coils good, 1 frayed," the quartermaster mutters. "Powder, 6-barrel sound, 2 wet. Nails, tools, medicine, food. Half as much as we'd like, twice as much as we deserve." The men chuckle quietly. Only after the necessities does he reach the part that matters most, the prizes. Cargo, sugar, rum, cloth, and tobacco. He pauses, glancing up at the captain, who nods. "All accounted for. Crew of the other ship surrendered. No losses here. 2 wounded, 1 paid already." His finger traces each line as though it's a prayer bead. You stand at the edge of the crowd, watching. Each man listens intently, not because of greed, but because the numbers on that parchment represent something deeper, proof that their dangerous idea of equality actually works. They risked death together. Now they'll share what came of it. When the list ends, the quartermaster wipes his hands on his trousers and steps aside. A small chest is brought forward. Not ornate, not romantic, just a wooden box bound with iron. Inside lies the real heart of the Republic, the treasury. Coins of every kind glint within. Spanish silver, Dutch copper, French gold, even the occasional foreign token worn smooth by travel. The sight of it feels heavier than it should. The crew forms a rough circle around the chest. No one rushes forward. The quartermaster begins again, his tone almost ceremonial. First, injury shares, he says. Tom Hales, right leg, fractured, half share in advance. He counts out coins into a small leather pouch and hands it to the limping man, who nods his thanks. Next, repairs and supplies, the quartermaster continues. Canvas, timber, powder and tar. Crew maintenance fund. He drops another handful of coins into a separate bag. Only when all debts are paid does he say the word everyone's been waiting for. Now, the division. The process is slower than you imagined. Each man's name is called, one at a time. The quartermaster counts his share aloud, silver coins ringing as they hit the wooden lid of the chest. The captain receives 2 shares, not 4, not 10, just 2. The quartermaster takes 1.5. The carpenter, the cook and the fiddler each take 1.25. Everyone else receives 1. The simplicity of it feels almost holy. You take your turn, stepping forward when called. The quartermaster counts aloud, placing each coin into your palm. They're cool and heavy, the weight of effort turned tangible. For the first time in your life, you hold proof that your labour has value measured in fairness, not favour. You don't know what to do with it at first. You slip the coins into a small pouch and tie it to your belt, though you keep touching it as if afraid it might vanish. When the counting ends, the chest is nearly empty. What remains is tucked away again for emergencies, sealed and witnessed by all. The quartermaster closes the ledger and signs it with a single stroke of charcoal. Done, he says. The crowd exhales as one. Then the laughter begins. Someone jokes that this is the only workplace where you can argue with your boss and still get paid on time. Another quips that the quartermaster must be part magician, turning blood and smoke into coin. The captain allows a small smile but says nothing. He seems content simply to watch his men look satisfied. As the sun climbs higher, the work continues. The damaged sails are patched, the deck scrubbed, and the captured cargo sorted for sale at the next port. You help stack barrels of sugar in the hold, the air thick with sweetness. The smell clings to you until you can taste it. When you climb back on deck, the world feels strangely calm again, as if the sea itself respects the act of balance that just took place. Later, as the day cools, the quartermaster sits beside you, his ledger open on his knees. He's drawing small marks beside names, double-checking figures. Fairness keeps men from killing each other, he says without looking up. Out here, fairness is cheaper than discipline. You nod. He glances at you and adds, on a Navy ship, you'd be flogged for looking at the captain wrong. Here, you just outvote him. Seems a better system to me. You ask him if no one ever cheats. He smiles faintly. Once, he says, a man tried to hide a handful of coins under his bunk. We found them, held a vote, and marooned him with a jug of water and a pistol. Not cruelty, just clarity. He taps the ledger. This book is worth more than any Bible. It keeps order without promising heaven. As dusk approaches, the light turns honey-coloured, catching the glint of coins still being counted at the edge of the deck. The crew lounges nearby, drinking watered rum, their laughter soft and tired. For all their roughness, they seem almost civilised in this moment, a council of equals who've somehow made justice float. You glance at your small pouch again. The coins inside jingle softly as the ship rocks. They feel heavier than gold, as if weighted with the proof that you belong to something honest, if temporary. the sea will take most things from you eventually. Time, strength, maybe even life. But for now, she's given you fairness. And that's no small gift. The quartermaster closes his ledger, tucks it under his arm and stands. We'll sell the rest in Nassau, he says. Plenty of taverns there, happy to lighten our load. The crew cheers quietly. You smile despite yourself. You've never been to Nassau, but you've heard the stories. A city of outlaws pretending to be kings, where gold flows faster than the tide and disappears just as quickly. The quartermaster grins at your expression. Enjoy it while you can, he says. Silver has legs and rum gives it wings. As the last light fades, the ship settles into a steady rhythm once more. The sound of waves against the hull, ropes creaking, laughter fading into song. The world feels balanced again, as if every injustice you left behind on the old ships has for now been set right. You lean on the rail and watch the horizon, coins heavy at your side, the scent of sugar still in the air. For the first time, wealth doesn't feel like greed. It feels like proof that you've survived another day. You smell Nassau long before you see it. The wind carries a mixture of spices, smoke, and something faintly rotten. The scent of too many dreams packed into too little space. By the time the island comes into view, the air feels heavier, full of sound and promise. Palms lean over a stretch of beach crowded with ships that should not all fit there. Their masts rise like a forest of thieves creaking in rhythm, each one a confession of some misdeed that somehow made it home. The captain stands beside you at the rail, watching the harbour grow larger. Nassau, he says quietly, the world's loudest secret. From here, it doesn't look like a city at all, more like a marketplace that forgot to close. You can see tavern roofs painted in fading colours, sails used as awnings, barrels stacked into walls. It's chaos shaped like celebration. When the anchor drops, the sound rings like a starting bell. The crew cheers softly, not from greed, but anticipation. The quartermaster turns to the men and says, "Remember the rules, spend what you like, fight only ashore, and don't try to outdrink the cook, he's an institution." Laughter follows, and the longboats are lowered. You step onto the sand and feel the ground shift under your feet. After so long at sea, solid earth feels strange, like standing on something that forgot how to move. The beach is littered with old bottles, broken shells, and laughter that seems to hang in the air. A group of sailors nearby sing a song about a captain who lost his ship and found his dignity at the bottom of a bottle. The rhythm is terrible, but the joy is contagious. You follow the others into town. The main street is nothing more than packed sand lined with taverns, their doors thrown open to the evening. Each building leans slightly, as if exhausted by its own stories. Music spills from every doorway, fiddles, drums, and voices already hoarse from celebration. A parrot shouts an insult from a balcony, and someone answers with a toast. Somewhere, a fight has already started, though no one seems to mind. Inside the tavern, the world becomes noise. The air is thick with smoke and rum, and the floorboards feel sticky under your boots. The cook is behind the counter, laughing with the innkeeper, a woman with a voice that could bend wood. She serves drinks the way a storm serves lightning, quick, loud, and without mercy. You take your first sip of Nassau rum and realise it's less a drink and more a short conversation with oblivion. The quartermaster raises a mug. "To the sea for letting us live long enough to complain about her." The toast is met with cheers, and mugs clash together, spilling half their contents on the floor. You can feel the warmth rise through you, a slow tide of recklessness. Coins change hands at impossible speed. Cards slapped down, dice rolling across the table, bets shouted over laughter. You watch one man lose everything, laugh about it, and then start again with borrowed money. "It's only silver," he says, shrugging. "We'll find more floating somewhere." A musician begins to play near the fireplace. His fiddle sings high and bright, cutting through the noise like a ribbon of light. The melody is old, familiar, and slightly off-key, but no one cares. The room moves with it, men stomping their boots, women spinning in skirts that catch the lamplight. You join in without meaning to, your feet learning the steps on their own. The floor seems to breathe with every jump. At some point, a man with a scar across his cheek leans close and asks if you believe in luck. You tell him that you used to, but now you believe in wind and timing. He laughs so hard he nearly falls off his chair. "Good answer," he says, slapping your back. Luck's just wind pretending it has a plan. The night deepens. Outside, torches burn low, and the air smells of roasted pork, pipe smoke and rain that hasn't decided whether to fall. Someone starts shouting about treasure maps. Someone else swears they once saw a ghost ship made entirely of silver. You learn quickly that in Nassau, truth is a guest, not a resident. Every story begins as a fact and ends as a legend before the mug is empty. You step outside for air and find the beach glowing faintly under the moon. The tide licks at the sand, carrying bits of discarded joy. An empty bottle, a broken coin purse, a shoe that no one will miss. A few men sleep where they fell, their snores mixing with the sound of the waves. From somewhere deeper in town comes a chorus of laughter, sharp and distant. Nassau never sleeps. It just changes songs. You walk along the shoreline, rum warming your chest, and think about how quickly money disappears here. The coins you earned in fairness now rest in someone else's hands, or on a tavern floor, or in the sea itself. But for some reason, you don't feel cheated. Every man here understands the unspoken truth. Gold doesn't last, and neither do people. What matters is the noise you make in between. As you walk, you pass a man carving something small from a piece of bone. You ask what it is. He holds it up, a tiny dice, smooth and pale. "For luck," he says, "or trouble. Hard to tell which until you roll it." He grins, tosses it to you, and keeps carving another. You turn it over in your hand, feeling the faint warmth from his fingers. For a moment, the world feels almost kind. Back inside the tavern, the music grows slower. The fiddler plays a soft tune now, something that sounds like memory. The crew hums along, voices low and steady. You sit by the window watching the lanterns flicker and fade. The cook snores beside an empty bottle. The quartermaster argues gently with the innkeeper over nothing at all, and someone at the bar declares they'll buy an island with tomorrow's plunder. You smile because you know they won't, and they know it too. When the first light of dawn touches the horizon, Nassau is still awake but gentler now, like a tired giant after a night of dancing. The last notes of the fiddle linger in the air as you step outside. The sand is cool under your feet. The ships in the harbour rock lazily, their reflections trembling in the water. You can already hear the quartermaster calling men back to the boats. The sea is waiting, patient as always. You glance back once at the mess of laughter, music and spilled dreams. For all its noise, Nassau feels fragile, a kingdom built entirely on borrowed time. You tighten the pouch at your belt, now half empty, and follow the others toward the boats. Behind you a gull screams, sounding almost like laughter. Maybe it is. The beach is quiet now. Only the sea keeps moving, rolling up and back again, each wave erasing what the last one left behind. You walk along the shore, the sand warm and fine beneath your bare feet, wondering how many stories began right here. A man with a shovel, a secret, and a bad plan. Somewhere, in 1,000 imaginations, this is where pirates hide their gold. The air should hum with mystery. The truth, of course, is less poetic. No pirate ever woke up, looked at a chest of coins and thought, I should bury this and leave a map with an X. That idea belongs to people who've never tried to keep a crew fed. You look around. There's nowhere to dig that the sea won't reclaim in a week. The tide itself seems to smirk at the notion, lapping quietly at the shore as if to say, go ahead, try me. The myth probably began on paper, not sand. Long after the last real pirate had been hanged or pardoned, a writer needed something exciting, something neater than accounting and far less violent. And so, buried treasure was born, a plot device with a shovel. It's tidy, It's dramatic, and it saves readers from having to imagine what pirates actually did with money, which was, in summary, spend it immediately. You imagine the scene as the legends tell it: a crew sneaking ashore under moonlight, dragging a heavy chest, glancing over their shoulders while the captain marks the spot on a map. It's wonderfully cinematic. In reality, it would have been wonderfully stupid. The first problem is arithmetic. Pirate ships worked on strict equality. The loot was divided as soon as possible, and every man received his share publicly, on deck, in full view of everyone else. Once the coins were handed over, they belonged to him. Asking men who've just risked their lives for those coins to hide them in a hole and walk away would have gone badly. The second problem is trust. Pirates trusted each other only as far as their next drink. Imagine 40 men knowing the same secret. The only thing they'd bury would be each other. You can picture it. The captain bending over his precious chest, only to find his crew behind him, shovels raised for a different kind of investment strategy. So instead, they spent it. Quickly, loudly, and with alarming creativity. In Nassau, you've seen it yourself. Gold turned into food, rum, weapons, and clothing bright enough to insult the sun. Money wasn't meant to rest. It was meant to vanish in exchange for noise and temporary glory. A pirate's version of an investment portfolio looked like this: a new pistol, a warm meal, and one very fine shirt that would not survive the week. There's one story that almost fits the myth. A man named William Kidd, once a privateer, then a pirate, though he would have argued the distinction mattered, was said to have buried part of his treasure before being caught. They found some coins later, though not enough to make him a legend. The real legacy was the rumour. Once people heard that a pirate had buried gold, they decided they all must have done it. A single act of desperation became an entire tradition in imagination. By the time a century had passed, readers wanted the thrill without the consequences. They liked the idea of treasure waiting quietly in the ground, a promise that adventure never truly ended. Books gave them that. So did the maps, elegant drawings with dotted lines and big letters, X marking destiny like a child's dream of certainty. No storms, no mutiny, no rot. Just an island, a spade, and glory. You kneel and let the sand trickle through your fingers. It slips away too easily to hide anything real. This is the sand that swallowed footprints and bones alike, the great equalizer of ambition. Whatever gold may have touched it has long since turned to salt and story. Still, there's a strange comfort in the idea. Humans like to think that value can be hidden safely, that fortune waits if you only dig in the right place. Maybe the myth survived because it felt hopeful. The sea takes everything eventually: ships, men, legends. So perhaps people needed to believe that something, somewhere, stayed put. The gulls cry overhead, loud and hungry, arguing about a dead fish near the waterline. You watch them for a moment and think how perfectly they represent human behaviour, each one convinced it's the rightful heir to something shiny that will soon be gone. The quartermaster wanders down the beach and stands beside you. He looks at the sand, then at the horizon. "You looking for something?" he asks. You shake your head. "Just thinking how much gold could fit under all this," he snorts. "Not much. The sea digs faster than we can." He pauses, then adds, "Besides, if we ever buried it, we'd spend the map arguing over who gets the X." He's right. The map, after all, is the most dangerous part. Paper can be copied, stolen, burned. Secrets breed faster than rats on a grain ship. A single rumour of treasure could draw a dozen crews to the same island, each one ready to kill for something that may never have existed. Better to spend it fast, to trade weight for laughter and wake up empty but alive. As the tide creeps closer, you realise how silly the whole idea is. Pirates hiding gold when the sea itself hides everything. The ocean is one vast, shifting vault, swallowing ships whole. Whatever treasure humanity lost, it's all down there now, scattered across the floor of the world, guarded by silence. You pick up a small piece of driftwood, draw a crooked X in the sand and laugh quietly. The mark looks confident for a moment, then a wave rolls in, smooth and unhurried, and wipes it away. The sea gives no speeches, it just edits. Somewhere out there, perhaps a child will grow up reading about buried treasure and believe it's true. Maybe that's fine. Imagination has its own kind of wealth, and it weighs nothing. For all their roughness, pirates gave the world a gift. They became proof that freedom could be messy and expensive and still worth the trouble. The wind shifts. The quartermaster starts walking back toward the boats. You stay behind a little longer, watching the horizon blur into the light. The sound of the waves grows softer, the sand warm against your skin. For all its nonsense, the myth has one truth left in it. Nothing buried ever really stays gone. It just changes shape and waits for someone to dig again. The sea is calm, grey and patient when the story of the plank drifts into conversation again. Someone asks if it ever really happened, if pirates truly made prisoners walk that narrow wooden stage into the open mouth of the ocean. The question hangs in the air like a gull circling for scraps. The men chuckle softly, each one pretending not to care, though everyone wants to know. The captain, polishing his spyglass nearby, glances over with that tired smile people wear when truth is duller than legend. "A plank," he says. "If we wanted a man gone, we had quicker options." He says it so casually that you almost miss the humour in it. The truth, like most things at sea, is practical. Pirates didn't waste time on ceremony. A ship was a crowded, swaying world made of wood and rope, and the last thing anyone wanted was to build stage props for executions. Rope was cheaper than carpentry. The sea did the rest. You imagine how the myth began. Perhaps a century later, in a theatre lit by candlelight, when someone decided that quiet drowning wasn't dramatic enough. A writer needed spectacle, a bit of choreography, a moment for the audience to hold their breath. And so the plank was invented, a perfect balance of suspense and inevitability. A man forced to walk forward into the unknown, step, creak, splash, silence, tragic, theatrical, and safely imaginary. On a real ship, nothing was that tidy. If a captive was to be killed, it happened with a knife or a pistol, or the simplest method of all, a shove. Sometimes they were marooned instead, left on a beach with a jug of water and a slow sunset. The sea has a way of handling paperwork without signatures. You can see it in your mind, though, the way the legend must have looked when it first appeared in print. The hero tied, the villain smiling, the audience gasping. It's a perfect piece of storytelling logic, simple geometry of guilt and justice. One straight line, one step too far. Real history, however, is full of crooked lines. The quartermaster joins you at the rail and listens while you explain the legend. He raises an eyebrow. "A plank," he says. "Why not just push him?" You shrug. Maybe it made them feel civilized. He nods thoughtfully. A lot of evil hides behind good manners. Then he smirks. "Still, I'd like to meet the man who thought extra carpentry was efficient." You both laugh quietly. Around you, the sea glimmers like polished metal. It's easy to imagine the theatre of it. The crowd below deck watching as someone edges toward their fate, waves slapping softly beneath. The ocean would have made the perfect accomplice, silent, mercifully cold, always hungry. But real pirates didn't need props. Their cruelty, when it appeared, was quick. They understood that time was currency, and revenge, though satisfying, rarely paid interest. Most preferred the simpler method of persuasion. A warning shot, a brandished pistol, or a few choice words about what could happen next. The goal was fear, not drama. Still, the plank survived, not on decks, but on pages. Sometime in the 1800s, as pirate stories spread across Europe and America, authors began adding it everywhere. It turned up in adventure novels, moral pamphlets, and eventually in stage plays where actors could fall safely through trapdoors instead of water. By then, The real pirates were long gone, but their reputations had become actors of their own. There's something poetic about it in a way. The myth of the plank isn't about execution, it's about hesitation. That slow walk toward an inevitable end captures something deeply human. Everyone has their own plank to cross, a decision made too late, a truth faced too slowly. It's not history that keeps the image alive, but recognition. We all know what it feels like to walk forward when we'd rather turn back. The carpenter passes by, overhearing your conversation. "You'd never get me to build one," he says flatly. "Waste of timber." Then he pauses, scratching his chin. "Though, if the pay were good..." He grins and keeps walking. The quartermaster shakes his head. "See? Even myths cost money." The sound of the waves fills the pause that follows. The gentle slap of water against wood could almost be applause for the absurdity of it all. You look down at the sea and imagine how cold it must be, how final. The idea of forcing someone to walk willingly into that kind of silence feels almost too civilized to be real. Pirates weren't philosophers of irony. They were men with very little time. Yet somehow, the plank refuses to die. It survived in drawings, in plays, in early films where the hero escaped by grabbing a rope at the last second. It appears in children's stories where villains twirl moustaches and speak in polite threats. It's comforting, really. Cruelty with rules, evil that announces itself first. Real danger never gives that courtesy. The captain joins you later, holding a mug of watered rum. "You know," he says, "I saw a play in London once. Had a pirate in a red coat, made his prisoners walk a plank over a pool on the stage. The audience loved it." He takes a sip and smiles faintly. "I almost didn't have the heart to tell them the truth." You ask what truth that was. He looks out toward the horizon, where the water glows faintly under the setting sun. "That pirates were never that patient," he says. The day fades, and the sea turns from grey to black. The ship creaks softly, its motion steady and soothing. You can almost see the phantom of that wooden board stretching out into the dark, the idea, not the object. It's funny how some inventions outlive the people who never used them. The plank exists now only in imagination, a symbol walking endlessly into the waves. You rest your hands on the rail, listening to the quiet rhythm of the water. Somewhere below, the sea keeps its own version of the story, one without words, one that swallows every sound the moment it's made. The plank never existed, not really, but the fear behind it did, and perhaps that's why it endures. The world prefers its villains with rules, its endings predictable, its dangers contained within neat wooden borders. The sea, though, has never cared for neatness. A gull cries once overhead and disappears into the dark. The quartermaster taps the rail with a grin. "Well," he says, "at least they didn't add parrots to that scene." You smile back. "Give them time." Morning light spills across the deck, soft and forgiving. You stretch, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and hear a faint sound from the rigging, a high-pitched screech that makes half the crew flinch. A moment later, a parrot lands on the mainmast, looking proud of itself. Its feathers glow green and gold, its eyes like polished beads. The bird squawks again, a noise somewhere between laughter and insult. The cook sighs. "That's the quartermaster's," he mutters. "Bought it in Nassau, said it was cheaper than conversation." The parrot immediately yells, "Cheaper than you!" and the crew bursts out laughing. You can't help but smile. It's easy to see how the legend began. A pirate with a bright bird on his shoulder looks like a walking flag, exotic, loud, and instantly recognizable. But the truth is far less glamorous. Most parrots didn't last long at sea. The noise, the smell, and the unpredictable talent for mimicking curses made them unpopular roommates. And in the middle of a sword fight, the last thing you want on your shoulder is something that screams at your enemy before you do. Still, they existed. Trophies from faraway islands, reminders that the world was bigger and more colourful than anyone back home imagined. A few sailors did keep them, though not for long. The birds were fragile and storms were indifferent. But in ports like Nassau, where feathers and rumour both sold quickly, the parrot became a kind of shorthand for adventure. It perched on the edge of history, waiting to be painted into stories. The carpenter joins you by the rail, his hands black with pitch. He glances at the bird unimpressed. "Pretty," he says, "but I'd rather have a hammer that talks back." He scratches his chin. At least that one wouldn't bite. The parrot squawks in protest, proving his point perfectly. You laugh and ask him about another myth, the wooden leg. He chuckles. "Oh, those were real enough," he says, "just not fashionable." He explains how a lost limb was common among sailors, thanks to cannon fire accidents and the sea's general lack of sympathy. A few men did have wooden legs, carved roughly and strapped with leather, but most used crutches or simply learned to balance differently. Life at sea didn't wait for convenience. The idea of a ship full of peg-legged pirates hopping around the deck, he adds, would have made navigation impossible and comedy unavoidable. You picture it and nearly choke on laughter. The image is absurd but charming, a crew of half-carved heroes clattering their way across planks, while parrots heckle them from above. It's the sort of exaggeration the world adores. It makes danger look like costume, loss look like style. Later, in the shade of the sails, you overhear the captain talking with the fiddler about stories. "They'll remember us wrong," the captain says, not sadly, just as fact. Give it a few generations and they'll add colours, props, maybe even music. The fiddler nods. Everyone loves a tune, even when it's out of key. He's right. When the first books about pirates appeared, readers didn't want men who smelled of salt and tar. They wanted characters. So the writers obliged. They gave them parrots for personality, peg legs for sympathy, and eye patches for mystery. The rough life of survival became a fashion statement, worn proudly by villains who never actually existed. You imagine an artist in a London attic, 100 years from now, sketching a pirate he's never met. He dips his brush into bright paint, adds a feathered companion, a polished peg leg, and a smirk that could sell tickets. He's never smelled the sea, but he's certain this is how freedom must look. Colourful, one-eyed, and just dangerous enough to make it charming. Reality, of course, was quieter. The carpenter's saw, the cook's ladle, the quartermaster's book, those were the real props of piracy. The sound of ropes tightening, the thud of a wave against the hull, the creak of a wooden floor beneath tired boots, that was the soundtrack. The parrots and peg legs belong to the after party, long after the guests have gone home. The quartermaster appears, his parrot still perched proudly on his shoulder. "See," he says, stroking the bird, "company and colour. What's not to like?" The parrot answers immediately, "You're ugly." The crew collapses with laughter again. The quartermaster sighs. Fine, it's accurate, but still rude. He tosses you a small wooden cup filled with watered rum and sits beside you. "People like symbols," he says. "Give them something bright and they'll forgive the shadows." He gestures toward the parrot. "That one's not really mine. I bought it for a friend's daughter. Figured she'd like something that tells lies, but looks beautiful." You nod, thinking of how every story begins that way. Something true at the edges, filled with decoration in the middle. The parrot squawks again, imitating the quartermaster's voice perfectly. "Fair shares, gentlemen." The timing is so precise that everyone cheers. Evening falls slowly. The deck glows golden, and the sea reflects it like a calm mirror. The parrot's feathers shimmer in the fading light. You realise that, for all its foolishness, the myth isn't cruel. It's just human. People need colour to remember things that were grey. They need symbols to make sense of lives they'll never live. You glance around. A crew of men with missing teeth, bad tempers, and tired smiles. None of them villains, none of them saints. The parrot screams again, ruining the moment completely. You laugh so hard you almost spill your drink. The carpenter shakes his head. So much for poetry. He turns back to his work. The sound of his saw takes over, steady and patient. Somewhere behind you, the fiddler starts a soft tune, and the parrot begins to mimic it. Badly, but enthusiastically. The two sounds weave together, wood and feather, truth and imitation. The captain leans against the mast, listening. "You know," he says, "that noise might outlive us all." He's probably right. Long after the sea takes this ship, the stories will keep flapping their wings, squawking nonsense, and somehow still sounding like freedom. As the stars appear, the quartermaster finally coaxes the parrot below deck. "Sleep," he mutters, though it's clear he means himself more than the bird. The night settles gently around the ship, the air warm and still. You stay at the rail a while longer, thinking about how myths grow, not from lies, but from love. The world liked pirates better when they came with parrots and painted smiles. It's easier to forgive a thief when he's charming. And so history turned rough men into bright legends, stitched together from pieces of rumour, memory and imagination. The sea hums softly beneath you, a lullaby made of truth and exaggeration. You close your eyes, hearing the last echo of the parrot's cry fade into the dark. It sounds almost like laughter, almost like applause. The sea grows quieter as the years turn. Fewer ships fly black flags now, and those that do seem smaller, lonelier, a little less certain of their own legends. You wake to a sound not of cannons or laughter, but of parchment. A messenger from the mainland stands on the dock below, holding a scroll sealed in red wax. The captain breaks it open, reads it slowly, then laughs, not with amusement but disbelief. It's a royal pardon. The words are neat, the ink precise. A generous offer, written in language so polite it almost sounds like mercy. Cease your unlawful acts, surrender within the year, and be forgiven by His Majesty. The paper smells faintly of ink, dust and bureaucracy. The crew gathers around to listen, though most can't read the words. The quartermaster translates softly, skipping the flourishes. "Stop robbing people, come home, and we'll pretend it never happened." The men exchange looks. Some smirk, others shift uneasily. A pardon sounds lovely in theory, but on this deck, it feels like the sea itself has written an eviction notice. The promise of forgiveness from the same king who once hanged their friends feels like a trick wrapped in ribbon. Still, the temptation glimmers. You can see it in their faces, the dream of land, roofs, and sleep without one eye open. That was the carrot. The stick came soon after. War had quieted in Europe, which meant the navy had ships to spare. Fast ones, armed with more cannons than imagination. They fanned out across the Caribbean like angry schoolmasters sent to reclaim their students. The royal orders were simple: persuade where possible, destroy where necessary. And persuasion, as it turned out, arrived with frigates. The man in charge of it all was Woodes Rogers, a privateer once, like many of the men he now hunted. He sailed into Nassau with parchment in one hand and power in the other. His arrival felt like weather changing. The first thing he did was post copies of the King's Pardon everywhere, on tavern doors, dock posts, even the walls of brothels. The second thing he did was anchor 2 warships in the harbour, their cannons aimed casually toward town. Rogers was polite, organised, and terrifying. He kept ledgers, held meetings, and spoke softly, the way men do when they know the numbers favour them. He didn't shout or threaten. He simply pointed at his paperwork and waited for people to make the sensible choice. The quartermaster called him the governor with a clipboard. You stand in Nassau's heat, watching pirates read their own obituaries in royal handwriting. Some laugh it off, others stare at the ground. The idea of surrendering doesn't feel heroic, but neither does dying on splintered decks for a cause that's run out of wind. You hear whispers of men already taking the offer, burying their pistols, trading freedom for peace. The captain folds the parchment, tucks it away, and says nothing for a long time. Finally he murmurs, "The sea's getting smaller." The words hang heavy, heavier even than the air. You realise he's right. The ocean hasn't changed, but the world around it has grown larger. Maps filled in, trade routes fortified, greed organised into companies with flags and logos. Piracy, once the art of defiance, now looks like bad business. The royal ships begin their patrols. You see them sometimes on the horizon, sleek and disciplined, their sails trimmed to perfection. They move with the precision of men who are paid regularly and punished predictably, a terrifying combination. The crew watches them from afar, silent. The quartermaster jokes that compliance has better funding. Over the months, Nassau begins to transform. The tavern's quiet, the old laughter fading into resignation. Some pirates take the pardon, accepting the governor's handshake with trembling hands. They become fishermen, labourers, sometimes even soldiers in the same navy they once defied. A few are hired to hunt their former brothers, a cruel efficiency that only empires can invent. Who better to catch a pirate, the governor said, than a pirate who's tired? The captain refuses, at least for now. Freedom's worth more than forgiveness, he says. But you can hear the weariness in his voice. Supplies are harder to find, safe ports fewer, rumours of captured ships more frequent. Each night the sea feels wider, emptier. The black flag, once a promise of fear, now looks like nostalgia. You start to notice small changes in the crew. The songs at night grow quieter. Fights end more quickly, often with apologies. No one talks about treasure anymore. Instead, they talk about choices, what they'll do when it's over, where they might go if they survive. Some dream of farms, others of simple work where no one asks their name. One man says he'll open a tavern and call it the Honest Liar. No one laughs, but everyone nods. The quartermaster keeps the king's parchment folded in his pocket. "Just paper," he says, but he touches it often, as if testing its weight. "Funny thing about forgiveness," he muses. "It always arrives right after you stop needing it." Weeks later, you sail past Nassau again. The harbour looks strange now, orderly, dull, safe. The governor's flag flutters where the Jolly Roger once danced. Men in uniforms patrol the docks, their boots thudding in unison. The smell of rum still lingers, but the air feels different, heavy with rules. You wonder if the sea misses its laughter. That night, as the ship drifts through calm water, the captain joins you at the rail. The moon casts a silver, rode across the waves. "They're calling it peace," he says quietly, but it feels more like silence. You don't answer. There's nothing to say. Below deck, the men sleep restlessly. Somewhere in the dark, the quartermaster's parrot mumbles in its sleep, repeating words it doesn't understand. Fair shares, fair shares. The sound fades into the creak of wood and the whisper of waves. You realise that the age of the pirate isn't ending with a battle. It's ending with paperwork. No thunder, no glory. Just a governor balancing columns on a page while the sea, indifferent as ever, keeps rocking the world to sleep. By dawn, the horizon glows pale gold. The captain still hasn't moved. You stand beside him, both watching the same light. For a long time, neither of you speaks. The only sound is the steady creak of the ship, a small heartbeat in a world that's learning how to measure freedom by signatures and stamps. The captain finally turns, his voice soft. "Maybe it's time," he says. You nod, though you're not sure what you're agreeing to. Surrender, change, or the quiet understanding that every tide must turn. The story of piracy doesn't end when the Caribbean quiets. It just moves, slipping east with the trade winds, past Africa's Horn, and into waters that smell of cinnamon, salt, and heat. The names change, the flags change, but the rhythm remains the same. Ships chasing wealth, men testing patience, empires pretending surprise. The Indian Ocean in the early 1700s was a merchant's dream and a thief's buffet. Great vessels loaded with silks, gems and spices sailed between India, Arabia and the Red Sea, heavy with profit and slow with pride. For years they passed unharmed, protected by distance and faith. Then one summer, a single act shattered that illusion. One ship too rich, one crew too bold, one decision that made the world blink. It was called the Ganj-e-Sawai, a Mughal treasure ship carrying pilgrims and gold on its way home. It never reached its port. A pirate vessel caught it mid-journey, cornering it under an empty sky. The fight was fast and ugly. When word of it spread, it was as if the ocean itself had committed a crime. The Mughal emperor was furious. The British East India Company was terrified. Trade halted, alliances trembled, and for the first time, piracy became an international crisis. You can almost hear the chaos that followed. Quills scratching in panic across ledgers, governors sending ships they didn't have, diplomats writing apologies that couldn't be sincere enough. The pirates vanished, of course. The sea keeps secrets better than any court. But the damage was done. For months, merchants sailed in nervous silence, watching every shadow in the water, every cloud that looked too much like a sail. The irony was that most of those pirates were once legal. They'd carried papers signed by kings, small documents called letters of marque, polite permission slips that allowed them to rob the enemies of their nation and call it patriotism. But peace always ruins paperwork. When wars ended, those licenses expired. Some men handed them back. Others kept stealing just without the signature. They were suddenly criminals in the same uniforms they'd worn as heroes. The sea is full of men who confuse employment with purpose. You picture one of them now, a sailor who's realised his flag no longer protects him. He stands at the edge of a foreign port, perhaps Madagascar, perhaps Yemen, and watches ships heavier than cities glide past. He knows he can't resist the pull of easy wealth. The wind smells of opportunity and salt. It always does. But the world east of Africa played the game differently. In the Barbary ports, Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, piracy had paperwork, offices, and accounting. These weren't renegade crews, but government-backed entrepreneurs, corsairs with business plans. Their ships were fast, their methods ruthless, their legal footing immaculate. They raided Christian vessels, took prisoners for ransom, and split profits with local rulers. It was the world's first public-private partnership of plunder. You can almost imagine the meeting, a corsair captain presenting his proposal to a city official. We'll seize goods from enemy nations, return with silver and slaves, and pay a fair tax to the state. The official nods, satisfied. Approved. Do remember to fly the correct flag. A handshake, a seal, and piracy becomes policy. It's oddly civilized. In the Atlantic, pirates voted. In the Mediterranean, they filed reports. Both stole, both killed, but one had paperwork thicker than its sails. The call to prayer drifts faintly over the water, echoing between stone harbours. The sound feels old enough to remember everything. You can picture the corsairs returning at dusk, ships scarred, men exhausted, holds heavy with goods and stories. They dock under the red glow of the setting sun, unload their prizes and walk through narrow streets that smell of smoke and sugar. Children run beside them, chasing coins that glint like stars. Above, the city watches, approvingly. Meanwhile, across the Indian Ocean, smaller pirate havens flicker to life and fade again like candles in wind. Madagascar becomes a myth, a place where every runaway sailor swears to have friends. Some call it a republic, others a trap. It's said you could find men of every nation there, bound only by hunger and rumour. The taverns were made of driftwood, the drinks of invention. Every map labelled it differently: Eden, chaos, home. You imagine a conversation between two men in that place. One says, "We're free here." The other answers, "Free from what?" The first pauses. "From rules." The second laughs softly. "Give it time. Even freedom develops regulations eventually." As empires expanded eastward, Trade routes thickened, and the line between privateering and piracy blurred again. Governments realised they could no longer claim moral outrage, not when their own merchants paid tribute to corsairs for safe passage. The sea had become a marketplace of contradictions, lawful theft, honourable deceit, and treaties signed in the same ink as ransom notes. The quartermaster, ever practical, puts it simply when you ask him. Everyone steals, he says. Some just have better stationery. You can see his point. The Barbary rulers collected tribute from nations that technically could have crushed them, but war was bad for commerce, and gold bought peace faster than gunpowder. So the great powers sent money each year, calling it diplomacy, and the corsairs sailed on, profitable and legitimate, as long as the ink stayed wet. Under that same sun, thousands of miles away, the Caribbean grows quiet, but the spirit of piracy still hums beneath the waves. It's not a flag anymore, it's a philosophy. The belief that if you move fast enough, you can stay one tide ahead of consequence. As night falls, you stand at the bow, the air thick and warm, the sea reflecting the lights of distant cities. Somewhere far inland, someone is probably writing another decree, another rule meant to keep order. But out here, order dissolves as quickly as ink in salt water. The captain joins you, watching the horizon glow faintly red. Different shores, he murmurs, same hunger. You nod. The details change, the flags, the languages, the excuses, but the story never really does. The sea, patient as ever, accepts all of them. Every empire, every outlaw, every bargain struck in the name of progress. It listens without judgment, then folds them into its endless ledger of waves. You close your eyes and let the warm wind press against your face. The air smells of spice and distance. Somewhere in the dark, a bell rings from a port you'll never see. It's the sound of civilization measuring itself, the hum of law pretending it can outlast the tide. Every sea tale ends the same way, with silence. The wind fades, the sails loosen, and the stories begin to settle into something softer. You've spent years drifting through this world of salt, gunpowder, and rumour, and now you find yourself standing at the edge of its last chapter. The pirates are gone, mostly. What remains are echoes, and the odd sound of paper replacing cannon fire. Some of them burned out brightly. The first ending was fire, the kind written into songs and trials. When the king's ships caught up with the last defiant captains, the battles were short and cruel. Gun decks thundered, smoke turned the air to wool, and men who had once laughed at death finally met it head-on. Their ships went down blazing, masts collapsing into flame. The sea swallowed them without judgment. The survivors, when there were any, watched the water boil with the last of their freedom and whispered that it was worth it. The second ending was quieter, but colder. The gallows. Across the ports of England, the Caribbean, and the colonies, wooden scaffolds sprouted like new trees. Pirates were led up the steps in daylight, dressed in their best shirts, some even humming shanties as they went. The crowds treated it as theatre. Justice always looks cleaner when seen from a safe distance. The rope creaked, the wind shifted, and the audience clapped politely. It was the Empire's way of writing an ending that everyone could watch. The bodies afterward were left in iron cages at the docks, gibbets they called them, a billboard for law, a warning that twitched in the wind. The third ending happened far from any applause. Some men were marooned, abandoned on empty islands with nothing but a pistol, a jug of water, and their own company. Those days were long, sun-bleached, and strangely peaceful. The unlucky ones starved. The lucky ones made friends with silence, learned to fish, and forgot to hope for rescue. For them, death wasn't punishment but routine. The sea, as always, preferred solitude. The fourth ending belonged to those who bent but didn't break. They accepted the king's pardon, walked down from the deck and blended back into the world they had once rejected. You could find them years later behind tavern counters, in fishing boats, or sitting by fires telling stories to children who didn't quite believe them. They spoke about freedom the way old soldiers speak about youth, with love, regret, and a certain relief that it's over. These were the men who learned that surviving's its own form of surrender. And then there was the fifth ending, the one that probably never happened but refuses to die. The story of the retired pirate, rich and content, living quietly in some coastal paradise, telling tall tales to anyone who buys him a drink. He's always smiling, always tan, and always fictional. Still, people like to imagine him out there, counting gold by candlelight, the parrot still talking nonsense in the background. Hope, like rumour, needs its own survivors. The real endings weren't as poetic. Trials were public sermons dressed as justice. Pamphlets printed the last words of the condemned, sometimes rewritten to make them sound suitably repentant. The gallows became a kind of pulpit, the hanging a lesson with a price of admission. The public came for entertainment, not reflection. The Crown, practical as ever, discovered that a corpse could be a deterrent and a spectacle in one convenient package. But even as the nooses tightened, another kind of work had already begun, the quiet rewriting of memory. In 1724, an anonymous author published a general history of the pirates. It wasn't the first book on the subject, but it was the one that mattered. Its pages turned real criminals into characters, their names reshuffled, their crimes edited into adventures. It sold astonishingly well. Readers preferred heroes who robbed, politely and died dramatically. The truth had too much salt in it. That book did something remarkable. It made pirates safe. No longer men who cut throats, they became men who cut profiles. The world could now adore what it once feared. 2 generations later, Robert Louis Stevenson opened that book, liked what he saw, and drew a map. From it came Treasure Island, a story where violence was clean, adventure was moral, and even the villains had charm. Stevenson's pirates sang, joked, and sometimes wept. They became the bedtime versions of men who'd once been nightmares. Then came theatre, and after that, film. Pirates learned to dance, duel, and deliver witty lines between cannon blasts. They lost their smell, but gained lighting. By the 20th century, the Black Flag had traded fear for marketing. The Jolly Roger fluttered on lunchboxes, costumes, and amusement park rides. Freedom had become family-friendly. You could almost imagine the ghosts of the old captains watching, bemused. All that for a ticket, they might say, but deep down, they'd understand. The legend worked because it solved the problem of contradiction. It let people dream of rebellion without the consequences. It offered freedom without hunger, danger without guilt. The truth, always heavier, stayed beneath the waves. A few rotting hulls, a scattering of coins, a silence that never needed applause. But the stories survived, reshaped until they fit whatever dream the next century required. The pirate became a mirror, part outlaw, part wish, part bedtime companion. Now, centuries later, the sound that once terrified sailors has turned into the hum of cinema projectors and the chatter of popcorn bags. The skull and crossbones flicker across screens, glowing bright white instead of bone. The sea still moves outside, unbothered, reflecting the same moon it always has. If you listen closely, you can still hear the rhythm, not of drums or chains, but of imagination breathing. You think about all those endings and how they somehow made one immortal beginning. Pirates were meant to vanish, but instead they multiplied. Every book, every painting, every costume party, another resurrection. They outlived their judges and their laws because myths obey no empire. Perhaps that's the real trick. The Black Flag no longer means fear me. It means remember me. You watch the horizon fade into dark blue, the sea calm and endless again. The waves fold quietly over everything that was. The fire, the rope, the laughter, the lies, smoothing them into the same rhythm that's always been there. Somewhere, a gull cries. Somewhere else, a child draws an X on a paper map and dreams of adventure. And maybe that's fine. The truth sleeps beneath the water. The legend sails forever on the wind. If you're still awake, you can almost see it. The faint shape of a flag moving gently against the stars. It flutters not as a threat now, but as a whisper, a reminder that freedom, even when borrowed, can never be fully caught. And that's the quietest kind of immortality there is.